All right, good morning. We're going to get started here. Linda, where are you? I fixed the audio problem. Well, there was audio, but it was mono, so it was only coming through the left speaker. So either yours wasn't set up to hear mono, because I put my headphones on, I was only hearing it out of my left ear, and so I fixed it. There's just a button to push. So it should work now. Okay, sounds good. 9:31. We're a little bit early for what I usually start, but that's okay. I know, right? That's what happens when I get a decent night's sleep. No. Yeah. Well, almost. Our neighbors had their baby Friday night. Yeah. Baby James was born at 2:15 a.m. on Saturday morning, actually. Yeah, they went into the hospital Thursday, and then I think they induced Friday morning, and then he was born Saturday morning. So, but he's healthy, mom's healthy. They're coming home today, theoretically, but we've got their dog, Toffee. So, but he's just a little, 10-pound guy, like this big, so. Yeah, yeah. Well, he's tiny compared to our dogs. Sure. Oh, yeah? What show are you on? Okay. Yeah. Hey, all right. Very cool. Oh, that's right. Okay. Yeah. That either escaped or somebody just let go. Yeah. Sure. Do you want me to announce it in worship? What? Why not? Okay. Perfect. Yeah, right. It'd be a bait cat. Okay, perfect. All right. Good. Yeah. I was going to say, I'm not so worried about the cat getting along with my dogs as my dogs getting along with the cat, as was evidenced yesterday by the two of them trying to chase mallard ducks on our walk over in the Fano Creek Trail. They were, it's a long story, but they have prey drive. They're wonderful. Yeah, they're both mutts, but we think Madeline's got a fair amount of lab in her, and Macaron's I don't know, he looks like a wolf kind of, so. Okay, so we are starting something new. We're going to talk about hospitality for a while. Today is a bit, hold on, I can't talk and spell at the same time. Hospitality. Today's going to be kind of an intro, both to why we're talking about this, but to some of the concepts that we're going to work on going forward. Where I got inspired to do this is twofold. One is that I think we are often ignorant to how much this concept applies to pretty much every narrative in Scripture. If you have in any story somebody being welcomed into a home or food being shared, hospitality concepts apply. So, just think quickly, or slowly, however, whatever, but think to yourself all of the different stories that setting exists in. We just had the Last Supper for Maundy Thursday. We have Elizabeth welcoming Mary. We have Mary and Martha welcoming Jesus. The washing of feet, the providing of food. We have Jesus. The feeding of the 5,000 is hospitality. All these apply. And this is just gospel stuff, right? We talk Old Testament stuff. And this concept, especially kind of the ancient Near Eastern almost law. I use that word intentionally. It's almost a law of hospitality. You will find in pretty much every narrative in some form or another. Abraham welcoming the three angels when God comes to make the covenant with Abraham. Rahab welcoming the spies from Joshua into her midst. The most awful story in the Bible, Judges 19, the story of the Levite and his concubine. That is two different stories of hospitality. And similar to the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, it is a reflection of the failure to provide hospitality and the consequences of that. Just to say that, one of the good reasons for talking about this is this is part of our lens that we need to have whenever we're reading Scripture. Okay? Pat?
Well, I think if you're walking down the street and you smile at somebody, that's hospitality because you're accepting them. It also throws them for a loop because they don't know.
Well, you have hit on something that we're going to talk a lot about, which is the venues in which we provide hospitality. Because I think sometimes we tend to think of this as something that only happens within your home, right? Or place of business or whatever, when you're welcoming somebody in. But in reality, these concepts are things that span human interaction and really kind of dictate and describe how we form and exercise relationship, but especially relationship with the stranger. That's kind of the most important part here in terms of talking about this concept, is the relationship with the stranger. 100%. That is a classic hospitality story. And oh man, and we're going to spend a lot of time with that text. Well, we're going to spend at least a day with that text, because of the way in which that story inverts the hospitality narrative. The fact that we'll talk about, not to spoil it, but the fact that the father brings out his best calf for his son, right, inverts that hospitality. He is providing hospitality as if his son was a stranger, but now, we're going to talk about that. That's a great example. So that's one of my reasons for wanting to talk about this, because it's actually something that it's going to be really helpful in reading Scripture in general, and it provides us with a helpful lens in understanding what's going on in a lot of the interpersonal interactions that are occurring in biblical texts. One other that popped to mind is the story of the woman, the Samaritan woman at the well. That is another issue of hospitality and how those dynamics are navigated. The other reason is that I just finished editing my friend's book, Anna Marsh. It just went to the publisher, and she'll hopefully have a copy of it this fall in time for her big conference. She's very excited she wanted to get it done by the end of March so that she could have a copy of the book in her hand when she went to her big conference this fall, and she could parade it around and stuff like that. The book it has a subtitle, which I forgot, but the main title is Food and Femininity. And so it is actually her doctoral dissertation that she did when she got her doctorate through Jewish Theological Seminary in New York. And now she is publishing it as a scholarly book. So it's not necessarily reading that I would recommend for light brunch, whatever, something to browse. It might put you to sleep fairly easy when you go to bed. But obviously, one of the big through lines in her study of the relationship between women and food in the Bible is in framing it in this. And she made some really interesting points in there, which I'll come back to later. But one of the things that she explains at length is that hospitality in the ancient world was the ancient world's version of foreign policy. Insofar as that the way in which you provide hospitality for the stranger or even the enemy dictates the relationship between you and your neighbor. So you would provide hospitality also to guarantee safe travel, because if you are welcoming into your home your neighbors in the town or the nation next door, if you're providing a hospitable environment, you're more likely to receive. Your trade goods are going to make it through that town the next time, you're sending your oldest son with goods to trade with, 2 towns over. So this was the way in which you formed relationships with your friends, your neighbors, and your enemies, right? This is the venue through which that happens. So again, I cannot overstate the importance of this concept and its existence in Scripture. Let me give you a little bit of a roadmap of what we're going to talk about over the course of this. And again, I'm really bad with saying which Sunday this is going to happen on, but I don't think this is going to be a whole summer thing. I'm hoping to wrap this up maybe by the end of May. But here's what I want to talk about. The first thing we're going to talk about is kind of like the overall general concept of hospitality. Today's a bit of an introduction. Next week, we're going to look at a couple of scripture texts. So we're effectively going to be kind of forming, if such a thing exists, what is a biblical concept of hospitality? And what we're really talking about is what does hospitality look like in the ancient Near East between 500 BCE and 100 Common Era, right? Because that's the setting that our scripture comes out of. That is the setting that Jesus exists in, and so it's if we can advocate for a biblical model of hospitality, that's where we'll get it from. But eventually, where I want to end up is I want us to have some conversations around what, having talked about this, what might hospitality look like for us in our modern context, both in terms of personal hospitality. In other words, how do I personally, or how does our family be more welcoming to our neighbor, but also, again, to the stranger in our midst, but maybe a little bit more pertinent, what does it look like for our faith community to practice hospitality? Again, I think that when we talk about being church, one of the big words that always comes up is whether we are welcoming or not.
Well, I think that hit it on the nose, is that just recognizing someone, whether you say hello, or what's your name, or just saying welcome, I'm glad you're here.
Yeah, there are a lot of ways, there are a lot of good practices that we can do. And certainly that kind of interaction is important, especially in terms of providing an initial kind of impression upon a person. And this is kind of a both and in terms of, I think when we think about this, it's how do we make sure that people visit and stay, right? We think of it in terms of kind of the transactional relationship, which is okay. That's important. We want our faith community to survive. I think this is helpful. But what we're going to, kind of the framework that we're going to be talking about from is what's our biblical imperative here? What's our biblical imperative, right? So in other words, this isn't just about like, how do we make sure that people don't run screaming once they enter through our doors, right? This is about what actually is the divine, if we are disciples of Jesus who are proclaiming the gospel in word and deed, how does that manifest in the way in which we are hospitable? Does that make sense? And again, theoretically, I'm not going to be putting words into our mouth. We're going to kind of talk about these concepts for a few weeks, and then this is going to be our closing conversation, if that makes sense. I'm just trying to give you a roadmap of where we're going, more so that I remember what I'm planning to do. Okay, I want to start actually by asking you a question today. And I was kind of debating whether I'd have us talk amongst ourselves, but I think we'll just do it in a big group because I've got a couple of questions. First question is, how does your family provide hospitality? And this could be your current family. This could be your historical family. So like, talk about the Christoffersons. How do the Christoffersons provide hospitality? Or it could be how when you were a child or a specific point in your life, how was hospitality evidenced in your family's practices? Always around food. Yeah, I'm gonna try to remember to write this stuff down so we can kind of create a word map. Yeah, this is central and pretty much ubiquitous across hospitality practice. I forgot to mention one of the pit stops that I want to make along the way is also talking about hospitality practices in different cultures. My friend Anna, or not Anna, my other professor friend Margot is recommending a couple of books. She's a professor of history at Reed College, and so we had dinner last night, the four of us, and I was asking her about this, and she has a bunch of books that she thinks I might be interested in. But food being central, is that everybody's kind of experience of offering hospitality? What did that look like? So, what'd you say? Great food? Or it was just objectively great that food was included. Yes. Yeah, I agree. This is here. I wish I'd draw a thumbs up. It is great that food is part of hospitality. I agree. So it's also learning to navigate that reality and in being appreciative of the gesture, if not the product.
From another state, our food usually centers around something we love that's from Texas.
Well, let me ask you a question, Linda. Do you notice any differences in hosting or hospitality from Texas to Oregon?
Not really.
No?
Just try to put out what I think everyone is amenable to.
Sure.
And sometimes it's Texas food, and sometimes it's bland Oregon food.
So you told a bit of a fib. I asked you if there were any differences, and you said no. But in reality, there is a difference in terms of the flavors that we appreciate. Which, and again, I'm making a little bit of fun of you, but that's actually something really important to think about.
There are a few people in this room who can nod their head.
Yes.
They have told me nothing spicy, Linda.
Yeah. Well, and there's the secondary issue there, which is how do you define spicy, right? So we had dinner with our friends Margot and Chandra last night, and Margot's from Boston, Chandra is from northern India. So spice for him, that term doesn't even apply. His spice tolerance is just in a different category from ours. I enjoy. Sorry, a bit of a tangent. I really enjoy spicy food, and I always thought that I could handle a lot of spice until I met Chandra, and then I realized that I'm on the white man spice scale, which I do okay for that. A quick story: is anybody familiar with Fire in the Mountain? Yeah, okay. Was one of our favorite places. I don't go there near as much as I used to, but they have what they call the El Jefe Challenge, which is El Jefe is their spiciest sauce, and it's made with ghost peppers or I don't know battery acid or something like that. And the thing is if you eat 6 of them in like 15 minutes or something like this, you get a T-shirt, which it's always like it's just bragging rights, right? Sean and I, my brother, we're not dumb enough to try and do that ourselves, but we wanted to see what it felt like, so we ordered 6 El Jefe wings to share between the two of us. Well, to give you an indication of how spicy it was, they actually gave us 7 wings, and we left the last one there. We both looked at each other. I'm like, I ate my 3, you ate your 3. Do you want to? And he's, is this a time to show your testosterone? And nope, we're good. Let's leave it alone. Anyways, okay. Food. What else in terms of hospitality?
My mom was a great cook, and that's her life was cooking and presentation.
Ooh. Oh man, and there are a couple of really important kind of cultural, contextual things there. First, this is really important. Okay, has anybody had the experience of receiving or giving hospitality out of your cultural context? Susan, is anything specifically in mind? Okay.
My daughter and her husband were volunteers in Morocco, and so we went over there to visit them for a week, and we spent one night at the family who was their host family when they first got there, and they were getting acclimated to living in Morocco, and they were sheep farmers, and they lived in this little village. I'll tell you, that family, there how many people would you say? 30 altogether. 30 people in this big room, and they had this shared dish of chicken and great
Oh man.
and ate it with
Yes.
like that. And I'll tell you, they were the nicest. I mean, Linda and I were the only people that did not speak the native language.
Sure.
They were Berber people, and they spoke a language called Tamil.
Okay. Wow.
And
Oh, how cool.
her husband spoke Tamil.
Yeah.
So we were kind of left out. But they went out of their way to
Yeah.
make sure everything was focused on us and made sure everything was okay. And we were part of that.
You and I will tell you, you got to experience some inheritance of that Near Eastern hospitality, right? That biblical hospitality that we're talking about. One of the we're going to talk about this, later in this study, but one of the interesting kind of questions in and around hospitality is the question of how much, right? How much do you provide when you are providing hospitality? And it's not just how much in terms of quantity, but in terms of quality as well too. And depending on the culture, you get in kind of an interesting dance around how you talk about that. Like, so do you make a big deal out of the hospitality that you're providing? In some cultures, that's part of it. Or do you downplay it? Like, I just pulled some things out of the fridge, right? And then next thing you know, it's a 5-course meal with appetizers and all that. It's that kind of dance. One of the things that you got to experience is this kind of emphasis on, and we talk about it in terms of modern cuisine as well too, how people eat with their eyes. Does anybody watch food documentaries like I do? I have not done as many recently, but for a while that's all I watched was like Mind of a Chef, Chef's Table, all these different documentaries on different professional chefs and how they ran the restaurants and the food that they created and where it came out of. And one of the themes, once you especially get into fine dining, where you pay $300 for a meal instead of $30, is how much visuals matter in terms of the presentation of the food. Something I've never mastered. I'm just like, I make it taste good. That's don't expect more than me. However, one of my out of cultural experiences is one of my good friends, James Obayashi. His parents are immigrants from Japan. They moved to Los Angeles in the 1960s, 70s, something like that. They were both born in the 40s, right around the same era as my dad, and moved to Los Angeles and started a restaurant. And actually, his name is James. He goes by Obi. Obi's dad, Hiro, who passed away here a couple years ago, was actually an award-winning sushi chef in Los Angeles. He had celebrities that would come by his restaurant, that kind of fame. Never got a Michelin star or any of that stuff, but you want to hear a different rant, allow me to rant about the Michelin organization. And the reason why Portland does not have any Michelin star restaurants is because it's a scam. Anyways, different thing. But I had the opportunity to get to know Hiro and his wife Yasuyo very well in the last 10 years or so, being friends with Obi. And one of the things that Hiro and I shared was our love of cooking. And so he cooked for me and for my wife several times, and I got to cook for him a couple of times. And one of the things that I always felt really imbalanced on was every meal that he prepared. Even if it was like, hey, Obi would call me, hey, my parents are bored on a Thursday evening, do you want to come over for dinner? And he would have, the napkins were starched and the plates are spotless, and he's presenting this food that has, it's got garnish and sauces sprinkled around it and the whole 9 yards. And partly that was because he was a professional chef. Partly there is a consciousness in Southeast Asian hospitality around this idea of presentation, right? And it's not just presentation of food, it's presentation of home, presentation of family. It is encoded in those interpersonal interactions, right? Which we struggle with as Westerners, which that's a whole other conversation, is, cultural greetings and cultural, all that stuff. But I experience this very fascinating. Anyways, what else? Yeah. 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 Let me finish what I got here. What was going on? I bet. I bet. And like this right here, right? This is why this is important, is those cultural differences. And if you had known going in, you probably would have had a different experience. But how often do we have somebody to prep us, saying, by the way, this is what you're going to experience. These are the expectations. This is how you greet. This is, but, and because we're going to talk about this at length, is how that creates complication and conflict, especially in the ancient world, right? In terms of expectations and all that jazz. It's very interesting. Oh, that was.
Etiquette that went around this meal, because one of the things that happened was all the adult men ate first,
Yeah.
and then I don't know
Yeah.
where
Oh. This is, yeah.
like the people that owned the property, they were next, and then there was the shepherds and then their families, and then it was just, and so my daughter was saying, you guys are going to eat first because you're the guests. Don't eat too much because this has to go around all these people. It was kind of, okay. That was explained to me.
Yeah. I'm glad that they did, right? Well, and okay, so when Abraham receives the three angels, or God, I mean, however you want to talk about the divine manifestation, what happens in that story? Which is, Abraham says, or Abram is, because he's not Abraham yet, says to his wife Sarai, go kill the fatted calf. And so what happens is Sarai and her maids prepare the meal, while Abram and the three men basically sit and have tea and eat, and then they eat while the women watch. And so that was the model of Near Eastern hospitality. Of course, that has to do with culture and context of patriarchy in the Old Testament and all that jazz, but that has filtered into modern cultural practices as well too. You could make a strong argument that the division of gender in meals, especially in Jewish contexts, is an inheritance of those ideas as well too. Like, especially in Orthodox, Haredi communities, men and women eat separately in public dining areas. Not necessarily in the home, but very interesting. And it has filtered through into our modern context as well too. How many? And I know we've got 80% women in the room today. How many of you prepared meals for your husbands? For your husbands or partners? You had Carolyn. You had a live-in chef. Still do. Yeah, I am pleased to upset that gender expectation. It's the other way around. But how many of you, whether you did, how many of you had mothers or female family members for whom that was the expectation, right? Dinner was on the table when the man got home from work, right? And the husband would sit down at the table, and the wife would serve him, and then the kids could come in, and that was how things went, right? So we're not that far removed from these kind of gender expectations. And again, this is not necessarily about good or bad. From a modern perspective, we would say, oh, that's very gender unequal, which it absolutely is, and I'm kind of glad that we don't do that anymore. It would make me uncomfortable. But it's really important to understand where that comes out of. Pat?
My father never got up from the dinner table without thanking my mother for the food.
Dang straight he didn't. Right? That, because that's the thing, right? If you were being served, you had best learn how precipitous, right, that relationship is, right? Because, what's the way in which you could be punished if you're being a jerk, right? Well, you better eat what your wife makes you, right? However it tastes. One thing I wrote down, which is really important to think about, because this is another cultural gap for us from kind of Western to Near Eastern or Southeastern culture, is communal versus individual dining. Then again, this still even there are some differences between how Len and I. For me, when I go to a restaurant, especially a restaurant I'm excited about, I've already kind of like picked out a dish that I want to try, and I don't want to share it. I'm awful. I'm like, I want this, and I just want to eat this. I don't want to try what you have. I don't want you to try what I have. I don't slap her hand. I've learned, Susan. Yeah, but for Elen, and I don't know if this is a French thing or just an Elen thing. This is what she loves to do. She's always advocating, let's buy this and let's buy this and then we can share. And I'm like, what you actually want is you just want to buy the two dishes that you want to try, so that you can have both of them. Anyways, has anybody in here? So you had the experience of Matt had the experience of Moroccan dining. Has anybody in here been to an Ethiopian restaurant or had any? There's a great restaurant over in Southeast called Bede Lucas, which I would highly recommend. Highly. Ethiopian meals are served on injera, which is fermented flatbread. And so what you can dine with 2, 4, 6, 8 people, whatever. You'll sit at a circular table, and when you order your food, what comes out is this giant, almost like pizza pan, with the injera on the bottom, and each dish that you ordered sitting on top of the injera, because the expectation is that you are eating this with your communal group, and you, like Matt experienced, you rip off a piece of bread, you pick up a piece of whatever, lamb or lentils, and then you eat it that way. Your hands get really messy. It's an experience, but it's really fun. Believe it or not, it's a really fun experience once you kind of get over those initial Western inhibitions of eating with forks and knives. I loved watching my wife do it, because she eats hamburgers and pizza with fork and knife, right? Being a proper French woman, and so she's learning to.
Used to be, if you went out to dinner with people and you were the host ordered first. If you never ordered anything,
Sure. Quick question: Well, one of the big differences, obviously, from maybe the culture and context that you, and to a certain extent I grew up in versus a modern context, is how much of your meals are restaurant or takeout dining versus prepared meals. Does anybody notice a difference in that between your generation and maybe your kids? Yeah. Big difference. I think younger generations, especially in an urban area where that kind of stuff is available, tend to eat out more, which is fine. This is not a value judgment, just kind of an acknowledgement of what exists. Versus, for me, growing up in rural Northeast Michigan, eating out was the thing you got to do once a month when mom got her paycheck, right, or whatever.
I think it has to do with the time crunch too.
Oh,
And
100%.
I see the younger generation so much busier than what I remember when we were raising the girls, and we went to McDonald's after church on Sunday.
Yes. Perkins, yes. Yes. And also, I just experienced this. We had our friends in town with 2 parents and 3 kids. The amount of time it takes and the amount of money it takes to feed 5 people is significant. Even in terms of like getting the order. Like we went hiking a couple of days, and both times we stopped to get sandwiches. Once at like Best Baguette, once at Jimmy John's. And the amount of time it takes for them to order, because you're asking a 15-year-old, 13-year-old, and a 9-year-old what they want from a menu they're not used to, right? So it's like, well, what is this going to taste like? But then also just how much money you're spending on 5 people versus 2 is really significant. And that was, for us growing up, just out of the question. Yeah.
Well, one of the experiences
Perkins.
that, recently is I have a friend who that works at a food pantry, so she gives out a lot of food. But then she will be kind enough to grab at the end of the session, if there's anything left, they're allowed to take stuff. And she brings me a lot of vegetables, because she
Sure.
doesn't like a lot of vegetables. And, they get expensive in the grocery store. But I see what she brings to me are the things that the people who are coming to the food pantry, they're not taking because they do not know how to
Yeah.
They've never experienced, how do you cook an eggplant? And how do you cook a, well, when I first met your wife,
Yep.
and we were working here,
Yep.
kind of food pantry.
Yeah.
There was a can of hominy.
Yeah. Which we still have in our pantry.
And she asked me, what is hominy?
Yeah.
And I said, no, it's hominy.
Yeah.
And she said,
And she may have said,
do with it.
she may have said omni because they aged probably through her for, yeah.
And so I tried to explain to her,
Yeah.
just rinse it and put it on the salad.
Yeah.
Throw it in soups or
Yeah.
whatever. But she never, obviously never,
Is an ingredient she had no experience with. Yeah.
so that's what I see with the food pantries, because they get all these wonderful foods.
Yep.
But the majority of food that people take are already prepared foods.
Well, and
They either don't have the facilities to cook, or they don't know how to cook.
And one of the things that is so here's a really interesting insight as well too. So like the work that Lutheran Community Services Northwest does, especially in their refugee resettlement, is do not underestimate the amount of training that you have to do teaching people who have immigrated from Sudan. I mean, pick your nation. Morning, Kizzy. To the U.S. and suddenly are walking into U.S. grocery stores, not even understanding how the whole thing works, right? This idea that you can go on a shelf and put it in your bag, right, and check it out. But also the ingredients are completely foreign, right? It's like every time I go to World Foods over on Barber, which is a fantastic grocery store, I love just walking down. There are a couple of aisles which are nothing but like Lebanese foods, and I'm just like, I have no idea what to do with any of these, but I kind of want to find out, you know? But one other really important, we talked about this when we were doing our study on the history of Native peoples in the Pacific Northwest, was one of the big issues in the forming of the Grand Ronde Reservation. Was they took all these tribes of people and plopped them on a piece of land out in the coastal range and said, here you go, here's pigs and wheat. And they're like, we have no idea what these are. We have no idea what to do with these, right? And of course they thought they were providing them with food, but they didn't know how to cook them. They had never seen a pig before. So sorry, Susan, go ahead. Oh, yes. Yes. Just in terms of didn't recognize anything. So many choices. Bread. Baked by the local baker. Right. Yeah.
So when we got married at King Station in Virginia at the military base, some of his friends invited us over for breakfast one morning and said, what do you want, toast or English muffins?
English muffin. Man, I'm going to set up a cross-cultural experience where you go grocery shopping with my wife and listen to her complain about bread in the U.S. It's just nonstop. She hates sourdough, just because they don't really believe it or not, they don't really do sourdough in France. It's just the flavor of it, but it's also what they call. So both Alen and our friends up in Seattle, you know what they call white bread? Squarey bread, because of the shape. They're like, what bread comes as a square? This is absolutely insane. Because bread from a French context is it's a loaf, a round loaf, or a baguette. What psychopath shapes it like a square? But that's what I grew up with. Wonder Bread or the local white bread or whatever. Even
The smell of a Wonder Bread bakery.
right. Franz's Bakery up by Fire on the Mountain and PRG. Every time we drive past there, I'm like, oh yeah, that's the good stuff. But again, culture.
So we were in Hawaii, and they had on the menu at this restaurant Japanese bread.
Okay. Yes. That really fluffy loaf, right?
And he just grabbed hunks of it.
Pull it off. One of my dreams is I want to make, there's a BLT recipe using that Japanese bread. Yeah, well, it's a long story. Yeah, it would be good. Anyways. Okay, let's shift gears a little bit. Before we move on, Any other, okay, sorry, 15 thoughts. Slow down, Jesse. Any other aspects of hospitality? We talked about food and presentation. What are the aspects of providing hospitality that are part of your experience or were important? Events. We're going to talk about that too. The hospitality. Oh, events in terms of that. Yeah, so special events. Okay, so this is an interesting. How many of you understood, growing up, that there was the meals that you ate as a family and then the special meals when you had guests over, or like Mike said, when it was a birthday or something like that? What did special meals consist of? What was the special food or special? Lefse. Yeah. Yes. Similarly, for me, my grandmother for Thanksgiving and Christmas would make all of the Norwegian cookies, right? And all of their, krumkake, etc., in all of their various forms. That was definitely part of it. What else? What were the special meals? Warner. Yes.
Those things, and they would make them, some of them in advance, and would roll them in powdered sugar.
Yes. It's so, and what I find hilarious too is the things that I found special, growing in the context that I grew up in versus, and sorry, think about how much sugar is available in our modern diet compared to what, again, I'm not ancient, but like even in the mid 80s, how much sugar was available, right, and how much, man. So many Norwegian, like I've shared Norwegian cookies with people, and they're like, "But they're kind of plain, aren't they?" I'm like, "They're subtle. There's a difference. They're subtle, and it's because they are a lot less sweet than if you buy a Chips Ahoy from the supermarket, which I have a hard time eating. But like again, it's that difference in what you have available. Powdered sugar, man. One of my favorite all-time Grandma Marie meals, well, it could be a meal, was potato donuts. Anybody grew up with the potato donuts? Another poverty food, basically, where you would take leftover mashed potatoes and mix them with some flour and sugar, deep fry them. And my brother and I loved them because you could freeze them and they basically maintain their same consistency. But what you would do is you would take a potato donut and a bowl of powdered sugar, and you would dip the donut in the powdered sugar and eat it like that, and that was heaven. That was heaven. That would be a heart attack for me now. That would be a blood sugar crisis. But man, that was great. Yeah. Sorry. Any other, like, this was a special thing?
Well, I think when I meet people for the first time, what's the connection? What's the kids who
Oh.
I usually say, "Oh, and where did you live before you came here?" "Oh, well, so-and-so is from such and such."
So an aspect of hospitality is conversation as well too. It's not just the providing of food. It is the communal experience. It is the conversational experience. Absolutely. I see another hand. Maureen. Cinnamon rolls, yes. Ugh. Now I know you're from Texas. Yeah, I know. I don't think I had a tamale until I was in my 30s. I'd never heard of them. I thought tamales were the candies that were red and shaped like pills, hot tamales. Yeah, I was really confused when somebody offered me tamales when I was in Indiana. It's like, that's a meal? Anyways. We'll talk. We'll have an opportunity to think more about these different aspects of hospitality. Okay, I'm going to write a. Hospitality industry. What is that describing? Hotels. If you Google hospitality, the first thing that pops up is 100 search results for the hospitality industry. If you Google books about hospitality, the first thing that pops up is 100 search results for strategies for managing hotels. I know this because I did this. I was really curious what would come about. Okay, one of the things that's really important for us to think about as we talk about this topic over the next several weeks is how much hospitality has changed. And again, this is not me saying, oh, it's worse or it's better or anything, but I just want you to understand the difference between the context in the world that our scripture comes out of versus how we think about hospitality in the modern world. So one of the things that's really important is understanding how siloed hospitality has become in the public sphere. Okay, when you want to go visit somewhere, so you're going to travel, what arrangements do you need to make ahead of time? What do you need to figure out? Where you're going to stay, how to get there. So you need to figure out lodging, transportation, yes, and food. Okay? And let's say you just picked a city at random, you're going to go there. It's flying distance, so you buy an airplane ticket, you fly to, I'll give an example, to Scottsdale, or you fly to Phoenix, Arizona. You rent a car, you drive to Scottsdale to stay in the Airbnb that you booked, and then you have an argument with your family because you want to cook every night rather than having to eat out, right? But where do you get your food? You don't get it at the place that you're staying. If you're lucky and you're staying in an Airbnb, they might have given you basics like oil and vinegar and water and salt and the things that you should have in every home, but shockingly don't appear there. How do you? This is what blows my mind. Sorry, quick rant. So the whole purpose of renting an Airbnb, in our opinion, is that you can cook your own meals. That's it. Right? It's more space and all that good stuff, but it's for us, it's specifically so that we don't have to stay in this siloed room and then go find somewhere to eat, and shell out a ton of money. We can cook meals that we enjoy at space. But how do you not have the basics like sharp knives? Don't I'm so just silly stuff. How do you not have saute pans? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You're not just going to your room until you meet up for dinner.
Absolutely not.
To be together.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And again, what I'm kind of getting at here is how the modern travel experience, each of these things exists kind of in its own space, right? Lodging, food, transportation, and kind of the things that we didn't get to name yet, but when you go to a foreign city, how do you figure out what you're going to see? Right? How do you know where to go or what to visit? Travel guide, okay? You're definitely not a millennial, Matt. But I appreciate that. My wife, she's religious about travel guides, right? So Rick Steves, yeah, as a millennial and younger, I Google things, right? I Google best places to see in Scottsdale, Arizona, or top museums, which now with the way that AI and algorithms work is not reliable anymore. You have to, it's harder than it ever was because the top 3 results you see are sponsored ads. So people have paid to get their name at the top of the list, and it's not necessarily the things you want to see, but that's a whole other story.
Jesse?
Yes, ma'am.
When Carolyn and I went to Germany, and we were going to rent a car because we were going to travel all over Germany.
Yeah.
I went on a Google Earth and literally drove the route.
And virtually.
So that I was familiar with landscape.
Good for you. I'm impressed. Good for you.
To this day, if I want to go to see what's going on in Rome, I might pull up Google Earth and
Yeah.
check around.
Yeah. That's fantastic. So what we do in 2026 when we're going to travel to Rome or Scottsdale or Madras, right, is we go on the internet or we pull out our travel guide. There's probably not many travel guides for Madras, but you never know. And you look for good restaurants, museums to see, or whatever you like to do in your downtime or whatever. Okay. Let's just appreciate for a moment how much of a snapshot in history this is. What did you do when you were younger, when you were kids? You wanted to travel somewhere. Get a map, right? So there was no GPS. You can't plug the address into your phone, and then panic when you lose signal or, or whatever. Yeah, I remember having the laminated maps that you could buy at the gas stations, which were the best because they were easy to open while you were driving, which you shouldn't do, but that's what you did, right? Or for your passenger to open, right? Because that would have been better. But they were easy to open. They didn't flop and fold. If you got them wet, they weren't, those. So I had laminated travel maps for Michigan, Indiana, Wisconsin, Minnesota, maybe Ohio. Who wants to go to Ohio? Illinois, like basically the general region. And then I remember when I drove, so my third year of seminary, I did my internship in Southern California. When I drove from the Twin Cities to Denver, I went on MapQuest, and I printed off step-by-step instructions of how to get, take the next turn. And boy, it was like a 4-page manual, right? And I remember thinking ahead, okay, I have to remember that I'm going to take a left up here, I'm going to take that, and then I'm on I-80 for 264 miles, right? It was really interesting how different it was. But what did you do before that? Maps, right? Or, okay, go ahead, Matt.
They had a triple A that used to have, I forget what they call it.
Triptychs.
And you go down to the triple A office and tell them you want to drive and say here to Denver, right? And they would actually make you a page by page spiral reminder.
Yeah.
And you flip that over, and they would actually trace out, the person that was working there at the desk would trace out the
Yes. Oh my God. I love it.
did the same thing you were describing.
Yep.
But they were really cool, and they would take you exactly where you wanted to go, and they were great little tools.
Absolutely.
Adam, for the next time that you were going to
Go, yeah, that's right.
save mine. One Christmas, I mentioned I would like a new Thomas map book,
Yep.
and one son got me the Thomas book, and the other son got me a GPS.
Oh man, there is a psychological profile right there. Oh man.
Yeah, but one problem with the triptych was, it's always a straight line. Always a straight line. No, it's not. It's gonna go, but when you look at it, it's a straight line.
Straight line. Yeah. For those of us who are visual, need a visual representation, is very unhelpful. Does anybody? I'm sure. I'm asking. Does anybody? When's the last time you actually asked a local for directions? Like you saw somebody outside of a gas station and said, "I need to get to such and such." Yeah.
Well, I did it because my husband didn't want to.
Oh boy, gender stereotypes. Yes, I can understand that. I resemble that remark. Yeah. Yeah. How many times has my wife, I never do it driving anymore, but when I'm in the grocery store and I've been wandering around for 15 minutes and she's like, why don't you just ask somebody? Like, that's not the point. They should have it in the place that makes sense. I was trying to find unflavored gelatin the other day, and you would think it would be right next to the regular gelatin. And it was, but it was hidden. Oh, hi, girls. All right, what did you learn today? I'm going to hand, who wants the mic?
We learned that John was trying to tell Thomas that Jesus rose from the dead, but then Thomas said, I will believe you when I touch the wounds in Jesus' hand, and then I will believe you.
And then what happened when Jesus came?
Jesus came and let Thomas touch his wounds. And he said, I believe you.
What did Jesus say?
I don't know. He breathed on Thomas and said, peace be with you.
And so what we did today is after Jesus breathed on Thomas and said, peace be with you, and gave him the Holy Spirit, that gave the disciples, what they needed to go and spread Jesus' word. So we talked about being disciples ourselves, and what can we do in our community to be disciples and spread Jesus' word. So what is one thing you said on there?
Love Jesus.
What is one thing you said?
Oopsies.
That's okay.
Be nice.
And I don't know, do you want to introduce yourself? You want me to introduce yourself?
Her name is Addie, and she's my cousin.
What did you say?
Be nice.
Okay, and then let's see if MJ. Do you,
Yes, Jesus.
and how do you say that in French?
We Zuzu.
You have very good pronunciation, MJ. Thank you, Addie, in September, and MJ. Thank you very much. This is wonderful. If I remember, I might have you come up before the sermon to show those off because it fits into what I'm talking about today. So thank you, Jamie. She said, yes, Jesus. Oui, Jésus. Yeah. Yeah, that's great. Great pronunciation, MJ. I'd be happy to teach you. Actually, I'd be happy to get my wife to teach you.
I'm sorry. September told me that your laugh is so loud it shakes the clouds.
I've got another story about that. Sometime I'm going to tell my wife that. She's always telling me, Jesse, tone it down. No. Okay. To wrap it up, so as we talk about hospitality, this is probably the thing that I think is going to be most helpful in understanding the cultural, contextual difference between the ancient world and the modern world in terms of when we talk about hospitality, what are the yeses and the nos? So in a modern world, again, when we travel, when we go somewhere, there are a lot of things that we take for granted, right? Like the idea that there are safe roads to travel upon, that they're maintained roads, right? We can gripe about construction all we want and the delays that it makes in traffic, but the fact that we can pull out of our driveway and drive 4,000 miles, right, without ever worrying about getting waylaid by bandits is really something that is remarkable in terms of the human experience over a historical period. Not to mention the fact that I can drive 4,000 miles in 2026, and there's a Tesla charging station spaced out enough. Not that I've tried. I don't have an electric vehicle, but there's somewhere to charge your car and/or get gasoline and/or stay the night, right? That is spaced out. So just in terms of hospitality infrastructure, but keep in mind how many of those things that we might talk about as hospitality are siloed into different, so a hotel provides you a place to stay. A restaurant, which might be in a hotel, provides you a place to eat. A rental car company or whatever provides you transportation, etc. I want us to understand that all those things existed in essentially one experience in the ancient world. So, again, in your imagination, if you wanted to travel, say, from Nazareth to Bethlehem, how did you do it? You walked. Maybe you had a donkey to carry your pregnant wife and or your valuables and travel gear. Where did you stay? If they existed, or an inn, or you camped, right? Or, and this is where or you come into a town and you ask if anybody has an extra room. This is the context in we talk about Sodom and Gomorrah, Judges 19, where it sounds strange to our ears, but what's happening when, for example, the Levite and his concubine walk into the town is that a man comes to them and offers them a place to stay. That seems like an idiosyncrasy to us. No, that's kind of how the world worked. This was how your community was judged, was whether or not there was a place for a stranger to stay when they were in town, whether somebody offered up hospitality out of the obligation of hospitality. So that's how you got there, right? We talked about, lodging. Where did you get food? Was there a McDonald's, right, on the corner? No. Potentially. Maybe you brought travel rations or things that you could cook over a campfire, or somebody provided hospitality to you. So maybe there was an inn. Maybe you were reliant upon a stranger who opened their home to you, provided you a meal, treated you like royalty, right? And sent you on your way. And so here's kind of the operative question. Why? Again, getting back to the question beginning, Why would people do that? Why do we go out of our way to do that? Why do we go out of our way to invite a stranger into our midst, to provide food and lodging and shelter and safety for them? Well, because that was the rule, because that was the expectation. Because if you did that for the stranger, then when you traveled to the next town over, it was out of the expectation and the hope that they would do that for you. So what happens if you abuse the stranger? You have destabilized the peace in that region, right? So if you abuse those who come into your midst, you now have created a situation in which you can no longer safely travel, because you have essentially said, strangers are not welcome in our town. What's their likelihood that they're going to welcome you? It's pretty low. So as we talk about, over the next couple of weeks, talk about this context, I want you to understand, when I said at the beginning, hospitality was foreign policy in the ancient world, how much this functions, how much you were reliant upon the kindness of others. One of the realities as well is you just didn't travel as much. If at all. I have friends, I have people that I grew up with that have never left the town that I grew up in. And no judgment, right? But that is a less and less common experience, okay? That would have been the norm in the ancient world. Here's the other remarkable thing to think about is how much the Passover interrupts or creates an interruption in that, right? In terms of one of the expectations in Jewish culture was that you would come to Jerusalem for the Passover. Think for a second about the absolute logistical nightmare that creates in Jerusalem, right? We're not talking about hotel reservations being booked, right? Is that you're showing up in Jerusalem for the Passover. Hopefully you have a family member that can shelter you, but otherwise you're either reliant upon the hospitality of a stranger or you're camped in the outskirts with all of the other pilgrims that have come and all of the vulnerabilities that creates for you. Not to mention just the traffic that you're going to get, foot traffic on the roads in and out of Jerusalem, not to mention carts. Here's one of the things, I gripe about driving in downtown Portland. Can you imagine passing through one of the gates in Jerusalem on Passover with how many thousands of people trying to get there? Meanwhile, security at the gates, right? It's not TSA. They're not patting you down as you come in, but they're definitely keeping an eye on people, making sure that there's no revolutionaries or coming in. So over the next several weeks, we're gonna take a look at biblical examples of hospitality and what we can learn from them, but with the intent of, as we kind of work our way through history to our modern context, how things have changed and what influence or information we can take away from that. I'll just close with my friend Margot, because her specialty in history is early American history, so right around just after the American Revolution, so late 18th, early 19th century. She's a treasure trove of fascinating stories. And I asked her, what did hospitality look like in that time period? And she said, taverns. That's it, taverns. And she said, one of the things about taverns is that we worry about our kids being exposed to undue influences via television or whatever. But when you walk into a bustling city with a family of 5, right, what might you find at a tavern? And again, that is in terms of people selling their bodies. It's also in terms of, the local jongleur, the local, musician who's singing bawdy tunes up on the stage, and you've got, beer being consumed, and meanwhile you're just trying to find a room for your friends. Margot told me about a book which I'm going to check out by a guy named Alexander Hamilton. Not the same Alexander Hamilton that the musical. It's a different Alexander Hamilton entirely. It's a Scottish guy that comes to the U.S. in and around the post-revolutionary period. And he basically writes a travel log of the experience of traveling down the eastern seaboard and all of the different experience he has is staying in taverns or staying in homes and remarking upon the different experiences of hospitality they receive. Absolutely fascinating. Anyways. Okay, thanks, folks. We'll see you in worship and next week and all that jazz. I don't really have any announcements. That's all.